Welcome to Instagram Live, everyone. We are coming to you from Virginia the day after the March for Life. And we had an important live that we needed to do. Welcome. I don't go live on here nearly enough, but we're going to try to do that more often. We're going to have our guest and dear friend, Dr. Brent Boles, on the show in just one moment, because the culture of death is experiencing another iteration in its ever morphing nature, especially in the post Roe versus Wade moment. The abortion industrial complex, the culture of death, has been forced to constantly mutate, to re-strategize their attempts to wipe out the preborn children in our midst, and to target anyone who would dare stand against that culture of death. So thanks to the Biden administration, the FDA, and the abortion industrial complex, pharmacies will now be turned into abortion mills. Oh, and by the way, if you work at a pharmacy and you're pro-life and you don't want to help prescribe and sell RU486, the abortion pill that cuts off the hormone progesterone so the baby's starved to death, and then misoprostol, which forces your uterus to have contractions, and Planned Parenthood has you sit on the toilet, so the American sewage system becomes the abortion industry's disposal system. Yeah, if you don't want to play party to that, you're fired. And so if you guys aren't aware, there's already a lawsuit. There's already a lausuit of a wonderful pro-life woman who was fired from a pharmacy for not wanting to do this. There is a shareholders meeting. Let's see, today is Saturday, January 21st. I believe there is a shareholders meeting for CVS in Newport Beach next Friday, whatever date that is, next Friday. And my friend AJ Hurley and some activists will be there. I won't be able to make it, but look for more information from AJ Hurley. Go follow Survivors. Go follow AJ Hurley on Instagram, and go follow Live Action for any updates. If you want to go be a pain in the ass, a stick in the eye, and a fly in the ointment to the abortion complex at the shareholders meeting, as the pharmacies of America are now going to be holding and selling the RU486 abortion pill. Can everyone hear me? Someone just said can't get sound. I'm hoping that that's just one person's device. We will also be sharing this as a podcast episode on Unaborted with Seth Gruber very soon. After the birth of my third child in December, we're fell off the podcast schedule a little bit there. Thank you guys. Thank you for saying you can hear me. Just want to make sure. So we're going to bring Dr. Brent Boles in here in just 1 second. If you have any questions for Dr. Brent, you can put those in here so we can address those towards the ends of the show. We want to make this more of an interactive podcast episode to flip this later for my podcast, because this is just another example of the breaking edges of the culture of death. Crazy, huh? The first thing the Biden administration did was to, one of the first things was to enshrine mail order murder, snail mail abortions. You don't have to have safety regulations or in-person meetings with a physician before you get the abortion pill. You can just ship it to a woman's mailbox. And now they want to put them in pharmacies as well. So as we bring Dr. Brent Boles in here, prepare your questions and buckle up. You're in for a treat.
Good morning.
Hey, Dr. Brent.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us again. Yes, you're the man. You're the most rebooked guest of my podcast, as you well know, because you're a powerful voice and you're armed with stats like some ninja is with knives. And this is why the abortion industry fears you so much and never wants you to give expert testimony in lawsuits or in cases. And so we appreciate you guys. Again, prepare any questions you might have for Dr. Brent Boles during our live here. And share this widely, as well as when it's posted on Unaborted, because this will be an important conversation. So, Dr. Brent, we're here in Virginia. We were at the March for Life yesterday. And one of the most important conversations the pro-life movement now has to have, unfortunately, is how to respond to this ever morphing and mutating leviathan that we call the abortion industry, and all of its various leviathan tentacles that continue to weave their way through every little institution and sort of nook and cranny that they can to put the culture of death on steroids. And the most recent example of this now is putting the RU486 mifeprex and misoprostol abortion pill into pharmacies. There's a lawsuit right now of a pro-life woman who was already fired from a pharmacy for not wanting to prescribe, sell, or play party to the abortion pill. So before we jump into that, Dr. Brent, there are many people who don't fully understand how the abortion pill works. I get asked all the time, like, what's the difference between the pill but then the abortion pill, but then what's plan B? And so sometimes there's a little bit of confusion. So plan B, or the morning after pill, is taken like if you didn't wear protection and it's the morning after. The pill is just, that women go on when they're having sex to hopefully not get pregnant. But we're talking about the abortion pill, which you take after you know you're pregnant, and up until 10 weeks. Dr. Brent, I've been told by Politico, let's see, this was from last year, don't you know, mifepristone has very few risk at all. They said it is more safe than over-the-counter medications like ibuprofen and Tylenol. Planned Parenthood President Cecile Richards, of course, in a Los Angeles Times opinion editorial from a few years ago, said the same thing. The abortion pill, it's actually safer than Tylenol. So why don't you give us a lay of the land? It's been a while since we've had you on, Dr. Brent. So kind of just do that overview, bring us up to speed on what RU486 is, how it functions, and then lastly, what's the true data about the risks of the abortion pill that the abortion industry completely ignores when they claim that it's like safer than surgical abortions, that it's safer than Tylenol.
Yes, that's a great introduction. The RU486, or mifeprex, or mifepristone, those are the three different names for it, is a medication or chemical that once someone has a positive pregnancy test and they want to terminate the pregnancy, and it does so by interfering with the natural intended function of progesterone, which is, progesterone's a hormone. The two primary hormones in a woman's body are estrogen and progesterone in terms of, their reproductive cycle. And the progesterone is crucial for the success and growth of a pregnancy. Well, if you interfere with the action of progesterone, causing the body to, in a way, believe that the progesterone is deficient, then you cause the loss of the pregnancy. The blood flow into the uterus and into the placenta decreases. You essentially suffocate and starve the intrauterine human being that is present. And then if it doesn't expel spontaneously, you give a medication that basically induces first trimester labor, called misoprostol or Sinotec. So that is the way that medication or chemical abortion works, and it is what, as you pointed out, they like to promote the safety of it. They have been relentless in trying to convince the American public that there is no issue with safety, that women are not harmed by using this to terminate pregnancies, and that it's safer than Tylenol. Well, I can tell you, as a practicing physician for, it's now been more than 30 years since I graduated medical school, I've never taken a woman to surgery and had to work to save her life because she took Tylenol. I have had to do that because she took mifeprex, including very recently. So that's just an outright lie to say that it is safe as Tylenol. In fact, the best data, when you look at data objectively, says that medication or chemical abortion is actually 4 times more likely to result in a significant adverse event or complication than a surgical. abortion than just into surgical abortion clinic and having a DNC in the first trimester. You are 4 times more likely to wind up in the emergency room getting emergency care to save your life if you did the termination with the chemical mifepristone instead of having it done surgically. So that's objective data. It's objective data that.
Yeah. And you've talked about that before on the show. It's data out of Finland. Is that right?
From Finland look at their centralized data and look at all treatment for pregnancies. They have socialized medicine there, completely socialized, single payer. So every encounter with the healthcare system is recorded, whether it's with an abortion provider or with a hospital or with a private gynecologist. It doesn't matter who they see. Every encounter with the healthcare system is reported. So it's comprehensive. Unlike the safety data in the United States, 22 states report no data on complications or deaths to the CDC, and 28 states have requirements to report complications but don't enforce those requirements. Also in the States, more than 60% of women who have a complication after an abortion are not seen by their abortion provider. They're seen in the emergency rooms. They're seen in the offices of their proctologists. And those things are almost never reported as abortion complications. So there is no data set in the States that can be used to talk about safety. And so they're being very, very self-serving and disingenuous. They try to tell us that medication abortion is safer than Tylenol. It is not. Right.
Wow. So, Dr. Brent, that was a very helpful primer here. We had a great comment here on our live together, and I appreciate it. So I want to speak to it and then put the ball back in your court. Someone said the abortion pill is not safe; it kills a baby. Correct, absolutely. The reason why this conversation is helpful, guys, and why we want you to listen and to share this, because Dr. Brent's going to share more data as well and expose a lot of the absolute hypocrisy and double standards of those who say that, hey, while we don't care about the life of the baby, we do care for the mother, right? While we may be pro-choice, we would never intentionally endanger the health and well-being of patients. Of course, meaning the patient, they only mean to be the mother. And Dr. Brent's going to expose how much this industry and the people behind it are just as eager and willing to treat the mothers and women as a sacrifice on the altar of abortion access, as they already are to treat the unborn child. And so this is why this is important. Listen, we're not having this conversation because we believe, well, abortion's wrong because it harms women. We're not having this conversation because we're saying this is so bad, the abortion pill is going to harm women. The reason why it's evil is because it kills babies, innocent human beings. And now the unborn is more of a target through these deadly abortion pills because Roe's overturned. And according to I think the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, but several other groups as well, Brent, 2 years ago, the abortion pill accounted for 50% of the nation's abortions. They're going to try to ramp that up now. So children are going to become more targeted. But listen, the reason why it's important to talk about the safety or lack thereof of the abortion pill to the women is because it's so overwhelmingly clear that the abortion pill harms women. It is extremely dangerous. That data out of Finland that Dr. Brent referred to shows that it's actually 4 times more dangerous for women than surgical abortions. So far from being safer than Tylenol, this puts women at risk. And so if you can prove that and you're equipped to use the data to argue this effectively, it, for all intents and purposes, exposes the abortion industry for the kind of evil demons that they are. That you don't care about the health care of women. You excitedly rush in to harm the very women you say you exist to serve. Okay, guys, so that's why this is important. Now, Dr. Brent, this is the new breaking edge now. They want the abortion pill in pharmacies. So give us an update on kind of how this happened, who's behind this, okay? And then let's talk about, of course, the hypocrisy and the coverage of...
Well, I want to reiterate what you just said. Yes, you and I, people who are pro-life, pro-women, pro-science, we know that abortion is wrong because each and every induced abortion ends the life of a living, not yet born human being. Not even going to get into the semantics like they do of whether it's, oh, it's a fetus, it's not a baby. It is a living but not yet born human being, and no one can say otherwise and tell the truth. Each induced abortion ends the life of a living but not yet born human being, and that makes it wrong. But what's doubly wrong is that the abortion industrial complex promotes this fiction while they ignore the status of, they really eliminate the concept of human rights, because the most important human right is the right to life. And the right to life for each and every, if you pick out any class of human beings and take away their right to life, then no one really has a right to life. They have the privilege of life because they're in a class that's been dehumanized. It was the same concept in the 50s that resulted in a Supreme Court decision that said that black people weren't people because they weren't entitled to rights. And so it's the same thing. 1973, Roe said that living but not yet born beings are not people and don't have rights. So it's the same thing. But what we are doing in this discussion today is outlining demonstrating the hypocrisy of those who claim to be all about women's health, and highlighting the lies that they tell to convince women that there are no consequences for terminating a pregnancy. We've done some podcasts together that have outlined a lot of that data very, very thoroughly. But today, you want to talk about what they're the agenda has been to make access to mifepristone very easy, even to the point that in some places there was a push to have it available in vending machines. So that's right. You cannot say that you're about women's health and that you care about women's health when this is the process that you're pursuing. And there were initially, when the FDA approved Mifeprex for use in the United States in the year 2000, there were restrictions. Those restrictions were adjusted, I think, in 2016, maybe 2012, but they were initially placed and then they were adjusted, and they were still pretty good. But what they required was that each person who is going to receive a dose of Mifeprex to terminate a pregnancy do so in the office of a provider who was certified to provide it safely, as if that was even possible, to be sure that the woman took it, but she didn't take it and go somewhere else and then give it to another person, to ensure that it was an intrauterine pregnancy and not an ectopic, and that it was within the gestational age limits. All are safety issues. They were all safety issues. We know from very good data, multiple sources, that the farther along you are when you attempt a chemical abortion, the greater your likelihood of an incomplete process with life-threatening hemorrhage and infection and other complications. So you need to be sure that you're in the right gestational age. You need to be sure that it's a pregnancy that's inside the uterus and not an ectopic. And those on our side, including the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, worked very hard to try to convince the FDA and other regulatory bodies that the risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, the REMS, requirements that were on the use of Mifeprex remain in place because of those safety issues. But the other side has relentlessly pushed for the ability to prescribe it and bill for prescribing it and make it easy to get by mailing it to the patient or by just sending a prescription to a pharmacy where a pharmacist is required to dispense the medication and participate in the process of aborting a child. With absolutely no attention paid to the undeniable fact that many women will be wrong about their gestational age if they're not assessed in person, that even if you ask about risk factors for ectopic pregnancy, you will miss 50% of the ectopic pregnancies. And I have seen women who have come to the emergency room at my hospital with ruptured ectopic pregnancies after taking mifepristone, who have to be rushed to the operating room and undergo emergency surgery to remove the pregnancy, to treat the bleeding, and to, in most cases, give them blood transfusions to save their life. It's happened multiple times with patients that are in one hospital in one city, and to think that that's not happening everywhere else is ludicrous.
Well, to bolster what you just said too, Dr. Brent, we texted a couple years back when this was happening, and you told me that at any one point with when you were still full-time OBGYN in Nashville, at any one point you were seeing, I think, maybe up to 100 women or something like that. And you said about 50% of them were 1 to 4 weeks off or wrong how far along they thought they were gestationally. And so, now I just did your anecdote. Now let's go data. According to a committee opinion from ACOG on dating pregnancies, up to 50% of women will be wrong about their gestational age when only relying on recall of their last menstrual period. And so this is, to summarize what you just said for you guys listening, what Dr. Brent is saying is when the Biden administration said no more safety regulations on the sale of the abortion pill, you don't have to show up in person anymore. Well, that meant that you didn't have to do an ultrasound on a woman wanting the abortion pill, which means that you can't get a confirmed date of gestational age and you can't rule out ectopic pregnancies. So now you're sending women home who would have ectopic pregnancies to have their fallopian tube rupture and then bleed out internally and die. Or to take the abortion pill because they think they're 8 weeks along, but maybe they're 12 weeks along. Maybe they're 13 weeks along. And now the baby, who may or may not have been killed, is floating around dead in the uterus, making mom susceptible to sepsis and death. So the abortion industry does all this, knowing this full well, right? And what happens, Dr. Brent, when you and I and others screamed about what would be coming that pro-choicers should want to avoid? What happened when we screamed these warnings?
The predictable response was that they wanted to minimize the risks and minimize the dangers. So they produced a ton of literature that had the pseudo respectability of being published in peer-reviewed journals, but those journals are always pro-abortion journals. I'm going to read a conclusion line from an article titled "Effectiveness, Safety, and Acceptability of No-Test Medical Abortion Provided via Telemedicine," published in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology in March of 2021. The conclusion was this model for medical abortion that includes no test and treatment without an ultrasound is effective, safe, acceptable, and improves access to care. And then in a cute little line in the abstract, it gives you a tweetable abstract. Compelling evidence from 52,142 women shows no test abortion is safe, effective, and improves care. Now this article, nothing in the abstract here about this article that talks about their methods and their results and what they looked at nothing mentions the risk of ectopic pregnancy and what happens to women. They ignored it as if it was not an issue because they didn't want the REMS to stay in place. They wanted to portray us as being just, Chicken Little crying, the sky's falling, and that's not truth at all. Women are being treated quite frequently in emergency rooms of the United States of America for complications from ruptured ectopics after they've taken medication abortion. So, and that's just one risk. Another study where they were discussing the so-called safety of telemedicine and no-test abortion admitted that one of the women in their group actually delivered a stillborn 33-week pregnancy at home after taking medication because she was that far off on her due date. But in spite of reporting and acknowledging that that actually happened in their treatment group, they still concluded that it's safe. What young woman wants to go through the unexpected delivery of a dead 33-week baby at home with no assistance, no epidural, no pain medication, and then dealing with the trauma of having her dead baby fall out at home? And that's called safe. Well, so when the abortion industry's need was to promote the safety, they mocked us, our concerns about gestational age and
that's right,
ectopic pregnancy. But now Dobbs has passed. So some states don't allow any abortions. Some states don't allow chemical abortions. So that's we now see their response. The next article I'm going to talk about, let's see what I've got here.
And while you pull that out, Dr. Brent, for those of you and anyone who wants to do their own research, because of course the entire activist media infrastructure, Dr. Brent, almost all parroted these lines. When pro-lifers raised our concerns, the overwhelming media infrastructure response was at-home and telemedicine abortions are safe, and it's not going to increase patient health and well-being. Of course, again, excluding the preborn as a patient, just meaning the mother. But for those who would do their research, right, and find these stories, there are stories. There's one in particular a couple years ago, Dr. Brent, year and a half, 2 years ago, of a father who found his teenage daughter dead in the bathroom floor, on the bathroom floor. Now, why? Well, because she had an ectopic pregnancy, and she got the abortion pill without being tested. And this is an important point. You shared this one on the show once, Dr. Brent. The effects and physical experience of mifepristone, of the first regimen of the abortion pill, is actually similar to pressure and pain you might feel when your fallopian tube is close to bursting. So they're thinking, well, this kind of experience and pressure I was told would be normal after I take the abortion pill. But really, her fallopian tube's about to burst. And so there are families who have found their daughters or roommates who have found their friends dead on the bathroom floor as a result of the removal of required in-person evaluations with a physician before the abortion pill. So guys, let's parrot this talking point again. This is proof positive beyond a shadow of a doubt. You need say nothing more that the abortion industry hates pregnant women. They view them as prospects for a sale. And if they have to intentionally harm or take their life and alter it on the sacrifice of abortion access, because the abortion pill, Dr. Brent, let's be honest, cheap to manufacture and sell at high margins, in this post-Roe moment, oh, they'll happily do that. They won't hesitate to do that. So if you do your research, you'll find all of this. Go ahead.
You know, they're not spending high margin.
Say that again.
No overhead. They're not paying to run a surgery center. They're not paying to employ physicians who are good enough to get staff privileges at a local hospital and take care of the complications. They're saving money all the way around on this because there's very little overhead to selling it online or telemedicine. Anyway, so the article that just came out, published with an online source called MedPage Today, author Amanda D'Ambrosio, initially published January 18th of this year, updated on the 19th, talking about the dangers of self-managed abortion. So, you would think when you first read the title, that's from an author that wants to be intellectually honest, but it's not. Here's what this article talks about. The two physicians that they talk about, or that they whose input they accepted, one of them you're not familiar with, but the other one you are. The one you're not familiar with, I looked her up, and in the article they don't acknowledge. They present what she says as being, expert dialogue. She's a second-year resident. She is not even halfway done with her training that would allow her to function independently without supervision.
Wow.
So what she points out, in a stunning lack of self-awareness of the hypocrisy of what she's saying, is that she is supporting, the institution of abortion. She clearly views it as a reproductive right. And after all of the effort by the abortion industry to talk about how safe it is, how much safer it is than Tylenol, how women are not going to be harmed by getting it without any testing or supervision, and how the REMS restrictions had to be lifted so that it could be mailed to anybody by any website, all of that. She supports all of that. But now that Dobbs has made it possible for some states to regulate or restrict abortion, causing some women in those states to seek illegal provision of the abortion pill so that they can take it in a no-test telemedicine style format. And remember, they said, you don't have to do ultrasounds and testing beforehand because it's safe to take. She says, after reporting on a case where a 22-year-old patient came in with a ruptured ectopic after taking Mifeprex, she says, and I'm quoting, "Providers should consider obtaining an ultrasound and assess beta-human chorionic gonadotropin levels for women presenting with a history of medication abortion." Now, didn't they just tell that they could, with the REMS could go away, and you could sell it in vending machines, and you could sell it online, mail it to people, and you could give it out in pharmacies without the person ever having to sit and speak to a provider? Didn't they just sell that position to get the FDA to do the REMS? But now they're saying, oh, Big Bad Dobbs is evil and wicked because now women are going to get Mifeprex without being supervised, and they're going to die because of it. Which is it? What level of delusional level and lack of self-awareness in what you're saying is required to have supported the unrestricted dispensation of this pill, but now to say that if women die of ectopics, it's going to be the fault of Dobbs? So the physician that you're familiar with who jumped on the bandwagon here is Dr. Daniel Grossman. I know you know him.
Yep.
So he goes, symptoms.
And he's an abortion trainer, by the way, for everyone listening, at UCSF, and is it the Bixby Center for Reproductive Health or something like this? But he works with a couple pro-abortion organizations and is involved in training late-term abortionists in San Francisco. So
and a paid consultant for Danco Pharmaceuticals that markets mifeprex. Don't forget that one.
There you go.
Symptoms
There you
such
go.
as severe abdominal pain days after a termination can be a red flag for clinicians that patients may need follow-up care. Well, the problem I have with this is actually seeing how it works out in the real world. Every ectopic that I have seen after a patient had been given a chemical abortion called her abortion provider with pain, with complaints of pain afterwards. And they were told it's normal. They were told, we can't get you in for an appointment. We don't have any appointment slots. So they wait and they wait and they wait until the pain is unbearable or they collapse from internal blood loss. And then they come to the ER and they get taken care of. So it's not ER physicians that need to be trained to recognize ectopics. It's the abortion providers that need to be trained to care about them, because they don't. They care about them.
Yep.
So here, another quote from Dr. Grossman. While self-managed abortion has been shown to be safe and effective, it does include some of the same safety checks for potentially serious complications such as ectopic pregnancy. Actually, I'm sorry, that's not Grossman. That was the other doctor, Dr. Bashar. So remember, in pushing the FDA to move REMS restrictions, the abortion industry and the American College of OBGYN said you don't need to do ultrasounds to look for ectopics because it's not going to be a safety issue. Now they're publishing opinions that say, self-managed abortion doesn't include the same safety checks for potentially serious complications of ectopic pregnancy. And so they're blaming the harm for women that come from missed topics on Dobbs themselves.
On pro-lifers. Yeah, that's shocking, isn't it? So, Dr. Brent, here is, let me bolster what you're saying again here, guys. And guys, let us know if there's any streaming issues. We want to post this on the podcast, so we're hoping that the stream is coming through okay. This is from April of 2021, Dr. Brent. I had you on the show for episode 104. If you guys want to go back and hear us say that this was all going to happen, go back to episode 104. It's called Mail Order Murder with Dr. Brent Boles. Here is Acting FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock as of April 2021, Dr. Brent, who informed the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in a letter Monday. This is at the time, so this would have been the Monday before April 22nd, 2021. That her agency concluded, quote, that allowing patients to receive the pills via telemedicine and through the mail will not increase risks and will keep people safe from contracting the virus. Will not increase risks. Acting FDA Commissioner Janet Woodcock as of April 2021. So this isn't just from, obviously pro-abortion hacks who said it wouldn't increase risk to mothers and now are saying it does. This is coming from the FDA as well. And so to respond to those, Dr. Brent, making the very ridiculous, ludicrous case that this is the fault of Dobbs and the pro-lifers who overturned Roe versus Wade, in April of 2021, they were doing this push already. In May of 2021, this was, I believe, 2020. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and other abortion supporting groups sued the HHS, remember, in 2020, and the FDA with ACLU lawyers to challenge the FDA's risk evaluation and mitigation strategy REMS rule. Then in July, a federal judge suspended the rule requiring women during COVID to visit a hospital clinic or medical clinic to obtain RU486. And then in January of 2021, the Supreme Court granted a request from the FDA to reinstate the federal requirement that the abortion pill be picked up in person during or after an in-person evaluation. And then in April of 2021, they got rid of all of the in-person requirements to get the abortion pill. So this happened and was in works well before Roe versus Wade got overturned. Over a year of this before Roe v. Wade got overturned. And this is what they wanted.
That's another example, just a glaring example of the double-minded hypocrisy and that's in that time of COVID craziness, multiple states, specifically, I remember Tennessee and Texas, and I think there were other ones. In addition to shutting down all doctors' offices and elective medical procedures, they ordered abortion clinics to close to reduce the spread of the virus. The abortion industry sued the state of Tennessee to block the closure requirement for their abortion clinics because they insisted that women needed to be able to come, despite the risk of COVID, to be able to obtain their abortions. But then several months later, when they were pushing the FDA to release the REMS restrictions, they made the case that it was too dangerous for women to come to the offices for in-person appointments because of COVID, and they needed to be able to mail the medication to them. So which was it? Were women safe enough from COVID to come to in-person visits when all other elective medicine was shut down? Or is COVID too dangerous for women to come for in-person visits, so we must be able to mail it to them? Which was it?
Wow.
There's no danger. They're saying that they wanted to say there's no danger from ectopic pregnancies for women, so we can mail this to whoever we want, and we don't have to see them for an in-person evaluation. But now that Dobbs has been, some states can regulate it, they want to say, well, women in those states who are going to be dead because of Dobbs, not because abortion was used to treat an ectopic pregnancy. It's just glaring issue. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. I always say, Dr. Brown, I say, here we are again complaining about the hypocritical left, and whining and moaning and saying, if the left didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. And it's like, guys, it's funny. I make those jokes too. It's okay. But listen, stop complaining. Okay. This is a note for the conservative movement and the pro-life movement. Stop complaining that people who murder babies don't have a functioning moral compass. Stop complaining that those who lie and call the baby an insensate blob of tissue and have been responsible for slaughtering over 65 million human beings are okay being hypocrites and changing standards. For goodness sake, what do you expect of them? I swear, we're going to be like in line being led into the gulags, Dr. Brent, and we're going to be making jokes saying, ha, 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 where's the tolerant left? Ha, ha, ha. Stop, okay? They know they're hypocrites. It's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. They have power. They have had the reins of power in most of the American institutions for a long, long time, and they wield it effectively. Of course, they're going to change the standards and the rules because they're in power and they can do it. They're going to turn a blind eye to anything that compromises their power. So just accept that, guys, get used to it. And ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? If there was ever a time to start getting political, it would have been, 10, 20 years ago. But right now, in this final sprint, it feels like, and fight for freedom, this is not the final iteration of the abortion industry strategy and the culture of death. But what we are starting to reach some of the final iterations. We had Mark Houck on the show the other day, Dr. Brennan. We're going to be releasing that episode shortly after his trial on Tuesday, today being Saturday, January 21st. Mark Houck is the pro-life Catholic dad and sidewalk counselor who the FBI almost broke down his door and arrested in front of his 7 children because of an interaction with a Planned Parenthood escort the year before who had been yelling obscenities in his son's face. And Mark said, back up. He didn't back up, so Mark pushed him over. He fell on his butt. He got up. He was fine. And none of the local authorities wanted to punish Mark, and they didn't take up the Planned Parenthood escort's case. They said, this is ridiculous. Next thing you know, Merrick Garland starts his revenge against all the pro-lifers and conservatives who denied him a seat on the Supreme Court. And they arrested him, brought him back that afternoon. It was just the Leviathan flexing its tentacles. And so they're going to come for us all. And this is kind of a scary next iteration of the abortion industry's plan, which is to just saturate the country with deadly abortion pills and enrich themselves in ways they never have before. So we just need to say that and say that clearly so you guys understand the larger plan that's at work right now. But Dr. Brent, thank you for covering these new articles where the left is suddenly admitting what pro-lifers said and now trying to blame us when they ignored our warnings in the first place. Dr. Brent, any final comments? And then if you guys have a pressing question in regards to this conversation, turning pharmacies into abortion mills and places of death, we can cover one or two questions if you have a pressing question. But Dr. Brent, as an OBGYN and a medical professional, do you have any closing thoughts and specifically advice for pro-lifers and I guess kind of really the Republican Party, the pro-life movement writ large, those who can actually do something against this?
Your comment about being politically active and how doing that we're 20 years late, we're 50 years late. You've pointed out before that Francis Schaeffer said, that abortions are open with the permission of the church because we've always been asleep on the issue. And too many people have. And again, just to remind everyone who may have have joined us after this recording started, we oppose induced abortion because each and every one ends the life of a living but not yet born human being. But what you and I are talking about is outlining the hypocrisy and disregard for women's safety that the so-called advocates for women's rights, what they really have, the truth that they're willing to ignore, and not just ignore, but actually distort and deny and lie about. So abortion is never safe for the unborn child. It's the only so-called medical procedure that is intended to end a life. Medicine is supposed to heal and extend life and improve quality of life, not end life. That's not medicine, that's murder. But for those who are on the fence or in the middle or think that there are reasons when it should be done and it should be available, you need to think about the truth of what it really does to women. Even if you don't care about what it does to the living but not yet born human being that dies in every abortion, take a look at what you do care about, what you should care about, which is the safety of the women involved. Interestingly, the one last point before you take any other questions. One of the references that I pulled in looking at this, was a reference written, a different reference, but it was an article that talked about the safety of not testing women, not seeing them in person, not verifying gestational age, and not doing ultrasounds to rule out ectopics. Was written, one of the primary authors was Dr. Elizabeth Raymond, co-author of the paper you and I have discussed many times, the Raymond and Grimes paper that falsely promotes the fiction that abortion is 14 times safer than childbirth. Anyway.
Well, there you go. Wow. Thank you. Another example of conflict of interest. Well, thank you, Dr. Brent. We had one question here, and then we'll leave it. I think it's important because this is scary stuff for people who are wanting to get into being pharmacists, just as it's scary for people who want to become OBGYNs, right? When last fall, Dr. Brent, the Biden administration was trying to amend this Civil Rights Act and code basically to make pregnancy a condition of sex so that they could go after pro-life OBGYNs who don't want to perform abortions under pregnancy discrimination lawsuits. So the same thing now is true for would-be future aspiring pharmacists. So what would you say to someone who wants to become a pharmacist and now is being scared of being forced to provide the pill? How would you encourage them and what would you say to them?
everyone, every healthcare provider, whether you're a physician, a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, a nurse, a pharmacist, whatever it is that you do in healthcare, you need to be concerned about the left's push to remove all conscience protections from federal law. Currently, there are solid, legitimate conscience protections that prevent any entity from coercing healthcare providers into participating in abortions. And the left has consistently opposed that. And during the Trump years, there was actually a court case the DOJ had against a hospital in Vermont that forced a nurse to participate in an abortion. And they had the hospital dead to rights. What happened after the Biden administration took office, they withdrew that prosecution in the hospital. So they want to remove all those restrictions. And that is one reason for anyone who's a pro-life healthcare provider, no matter what your role is, to be politically active and aware and pressure those who are, there are plenty of people in the Republican Party who aren't just, they're also pro-life, and they need to feel some heat. Need to know that this is an issue that that can't be a negotiating point. It can't be something that's ignored or forgotten, that the conscience protections that have been in federal law for decades need to remain, and they don't need to be eroded, so that we can continue to have healthcare providers in the United States of America who actually care about healthcare for everyone. Be active, don't give up on a career that is the focus of your dreams because of this one thing, but don't miss any opportunity that you have to make a difference in the issue.
And don't give up your convictions, and be ready to suffer for having those convictions. So if you're looking to be a pharmacist and this stuff scares you, I don't know what to tell you except welcome to the Leviathan. Welcome to the size that beast can grow when good people do nothing. And the capital C Church in America and those who call themselves Republicans have for decades been apathetic, have been bickering amongst themselves, and failing to provide a political vision for the country that is compelling, and to unite with those who differ on third and fourth tier issues to protect, fight for, and contend for those first tier issues and rights, while the left will siphon off and ignore any other tangential disagreement they have to unite together under a common banner anytime their core sacraments are compromised. Boy, could we take a page from the left. As my pastor Rob McCoy says, why won't we do for good what the other side so zealously does for evil? So this is a sobering live stream and podcast episode, but welcome to the culture of death, and welcome to what's happened because we've abdicated our duty in the public square for so long. So time to wake up, guys. Dr. Brent, thank you for joining the show today. We appreciate your expertise as a medical professional, right? I was told to follow the science, and yet they don't seem to want to follow the science provided by people like Dr. Brent because they're pro-life, which should tell you is never about science, but ideological uniformity. And if you won't fit into the cogs of the wheels of the party, you will be thrown out into the secular humanists' utter darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. And this is another example of that. Thank you guys for joining today. We will be using this as a podcast episode. So if you're listening now, this is probably on the podcast as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, Dr. Brent, Seth Gruber. I'm Seth Gruber, and this is Unaborted. Peace.